Spontaneous Speaking Video 22. So today in my class, we learned about the concept of metacognition, and I actually found that pretty fascinating because it sort of relates to what I think of when I think of introverted intuition, the perceiving process made by NJs. And it became even more fascinating when actually, you know what? I think what we're going to do is first I'm going to explain what metacognition is. And I'm going to do this by drawing out a model. I'm going to put a different, more well-drawn out model as a thumbnail for the video, but for spontaneous reasons and because I like drawing on walls, I'm going to do this in real time. So basically, metacognition, spelled like this. I feel like a teacher. Oh, this sucks. Meta. It's all one word, but it's broken up into two. Apparently, meta means beyond, and then cognition means basically your way of thinking. And so when you look at this, oh, that's awkward. Well, since I'm not going to take the time to try and write that backwards, I guess what we're going to have to do is I'm just going to have to put the picture in 3, 2, 1. Metacognition is basically meaning beyond for meta, and then cognition for thinking. And we have a person drawn over there, and that person is basically thinking X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And then the person begins to start thinking about or beyond why he or she is thinking about X, Y, Z, or A, B, C. And basically all of that is just a fancy way of saying that metacognition is a way of retracing your train of thought. And this is a very interesting concept to me because as an ENFJ, my perceiving process is NI, also known as Introverted Intuition. And this is all about understanding and recognizing the pattern of my own mind. So stepping out of my own perspective, my own thought process, observing myself in third person and basically understanding the patterns of my own mind. And so all NJs use this: INTJ, ENTJ, ENFJ, and INFJ. And what I found interesting about this is that since it's our natural perceiving process, I always thought that it was something that everybody basically did until I learned about MBTI, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm one of the few people who actually use this perceiving process. And what made it even more fascinating to me was that when we started talking about it today in class, I had a lot of things to say about it, and today the only other two people who commented on it were the very only two people that I have typed in my mind as ENFJs. And these two girls, when the teacher asked, even the teacher herself, I typed her as ESFJ, even the teacher herself, she said that she wishes that she had practiced this more. And one thing that we should know is that just because it's not in your cognitive function stack does not mean that you can't do it at all. You can still practice some things, but it's just not going to come as naturally to you. And so you'll probably never become as efficient as an NJ user in using introverted intuition or metacognition, but that doesn't mean that you are incapable of doing it at all. Just like an extroverted feeler is incapable or is not incapable of looking at themselves and thinking, oh, how do I feel about this or whatever. It may be harder, but it's not impossible. So in the same sense, my teacher said that she wishes that she had become more natural with it, and she asked the class, how many of you actually practice this, or how many of you have ever really done this before, all of that. And to my absolute surprise, even though I knew that, there was only us 3 NJs in the room, possibly, I at least expected, some of the other people to like raise their hands a little bit, because we use all of the functions, all 8 of the functions, like every now and then, I believe, even though if it's not in our stack. But literally only me and the other two ENFJs raised our hands. And I was just fascinated by that. And we were the only ones that had things to say. Now, of course, they don't really know that they're ENFJs. Like, this is just what I've typed them as. This is how, from observing them, this is how I know, like, what they are and everything. But, yeah, I found metacognition to be something to be very fascinating. And I think that there's a lot of importance to how it should be used as a skill. Like I said, even if it's not in your function stack. One example of this that my teacher gave was that she could be in church. And she would be thinking about what the pastor is preaching, and then that'll lead to another thought, and then that'll lead to another thought, and then that'll lead to another thought, and then she'd be like, oh wait, how did I even get here? And then she would have to like retrace her steps back into that thought. And next thing you know, it's like if you're looking at point A and point D of her thought process, you would think that there's no connection and that it's just really abstract. Like, wait, these two things don't relate. But then if you all of a sudden look at the points in between, then you're like, oh, shoot, wait, this is how these things relate because of blah, 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 blah. And this is what ENFJs, INFJs, INTJs, and ENTJs are really good at, because they intuitively not only watch their own minds form these patterns and then retrace their thought process, like, wait, how did I start thinking this? Why do I think this way? Blah, 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 blah. But now they got so good at it that they're able to look at other people and be like, oh, I think that the way that you think this, or the reason why you think this, or the reason why you're going to think this is because of this. Because they've gotten so used to that pattern of people, of how you think in that way, or what leads up to those steps. So all of this to say, metacognition is very similar to NI, Introverted Intuition, which, if I haven't already defined that, it's all about perspective shifting, understanding the patterns of not only your mind, but once you've done so well at understanding the pattern of how your mind forms or comes to its conclusions and everything, then you begin to understand the patterns and perspectives of other people, always being detached from your own perspective just enough to be able to see another person's perspective. And then ENFJs mostly usually use that perspective to like draw you in to their own perspective, or to like create understanding between, oh, this person's perspective and this person's perspective. Oh, wait, you two are both talking about the same thing, but you guys just don't know it. Or you two are actually talking about two different things and you guys don't really know it, because the NJs, the metacognitive people, are usually more aware of how other people are thinking. And I think that if we continue to use this process to understand how our minds work, even outside of an MBTI sort of fashion, and then understand how other people's minds work and how other people perspectives look, and perspective shift into their perspective, maybe the world will become a better place. And lastly, I'll just say that I think one good example of this would be in my previous video on chasing after buses. That was basically a sign. I used this example in class, and my teacher was very fascinated. I have a tendency of making insignificant times in my life very significant. But she was fascinated at how I actually sat down in the bus and thought about this whole thing. Like, wow, me thinking this way stopped me, like did not stop me, or could have stopped me from catching the bus. But because I didn't allow it to stop me, then, basically I just had this whole metacognitive process on the bus when I finally caught it. And a lot of people would have just been like, oh yeah, I would have just been like, yeah, I caught the bus and that was it. They wouldn't have given it no second thought. But an NJ would typically sit down and think about how they thought in this way and why they thought in this way. And I think that if more people practice that type of metacognitive thinking, then it'll benefit them a lot. Done.